What is up, Liverpool One Church? Man, it is so great to see each and every one of you guys here this morning, whether you're in the room, whether you're watching online. Hey, we love you guys, and you're so welcome here at Liverpool One Church, right?
Yeah, and hey, if it's your first time with us today, maybe you're in the room or on home, watching from home, a massive warm welcome. Maybe you came on Friday to our Braveheart event. It went off the chain in here. Nathan was very jealous that he wasn't a female for the night because it was amazing. But maybe you've come as a result of that, or someone has invited you today. A massive warm welcome to you. And hey, we would love to connect with you. And if you're in the room, on the seat pockets in front of you, you'll see these connections. And you can scan that QR code, and we would love to connect with you. It's really easy to scan that, and a connection page will come up so we can get connected with you guys here at Liverpool One Church.
So good. And hey, you guys have come on an amazing Sunday. It's Life Group Sign Up Sunday.
Yes.
Come on, who loves life groups, right? You know what? At Liverpool One Church, we do two things really well. We do big Sundays and we do small groups. And hey, later on, we'll give you more information on about life groups, how you can sign up. But life groups, it's a family thing, isn't it? You get to come around, be together. And you know what? Life groups for me have been a real game changer in my life. And hopefully it will be also for you. But Life Group Sign Up Sunday, I'm excited.
Yes, definitely. But guys, we are starting a brand new series. They call it About Everyone. It's going to be amazing. So guys, why don't you stand to your feet as we worship and welcome you to Liverpool One Church.
Church, good morning. We're so excited to have you. Are you ready to worship? Come on, let's sing together. There is no shadow that has ever overcome your life. There is no rival that has ever stand against your mind. You've always been with us. Every battle you've already won. We've already won. There is no weapon that has ever left a mark on you. There is no army with the power to conquer truth. You've always been with us. Every battle you've already won. You've already won. Show me one thing he can do. Show me a mountain he can't move. He's the God of the breakthrough. Anything is possible. Show me one thing that's too hard. Show me waters he can't part. He's the God of the breakthrough, and anything is possible. Is possible. There is a kingdom that's advancing at the speed of light, and in his kingdom every dead thing is bound to rise. Oh God, our Redeemer, he is faithful to revive. Oh, he will revive. Oh, show me one thing he can do. Show me a mountain he can move. He's the God of the breakthrough, and anything is possible. Show me one thing that's too hard. Show me waters he can't part. He's the God of the breakthrough, and anything is possible. It's possible. Come on, church.
Now all of my fear I will turn into praise. Shake off despair as I sing out your name. A victory dance, I will dance out in faith. I will crush disappointment and break every chain.
Now all of my fear I will turn into praise. Shake off despair as I sing out your name. A victory dance, I will dance out in faith. I will crush disappointment and break every chain. Now all of my fear I will turn into
battle. You see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see the mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, you can't be against me. For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see is the ashes, you see the when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. And I see through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Well, hey, Liverpool One Church, it is so good to have you with us today. You can go ahead and take your seats, make yourself feel relaxed and at home. We are about to jump into a new series next week, actually, but today is Life Group Sign Up Sunday. And some of you might already be thinking, like, Life Group Sign Up Sunday, what the heck is that? Like, what is that all about? Well, I'm just gonna put my cards right on the table, right from the jump, right from the off, and just say, hey, today we're going to be telling you exactly why we as a church do life groups. And then at the very end of the service, just so that like nobody feels like we've taken you by surprise, we're going to ask every single one of you to sign up for a life group. So this is a really great day in the life of church, and especially for those of you who are in the room, but also for those of you who are joining us online. It's amazing to have you with us. You are just as much part of our church family as everybody that's gathered here. It's been mentioned earlier, actually, that we kind of put most of our energy and most of our efforts as a church into just trying to do two things really well: big Sundays and small groups. Now, the reality of it is that we could do a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's what we feel we're best placed to do in our city, in our region. Like, let's just focus on doing two things and try and do them to the very best of our ability, like big Sundays and small groups. In fact, we kind of see this, what we're all experiencing right now, the Sunday celebration, the Sunday service of church. We see this as being like, it's the huddle before the game, before everybody goes to go out and play life Monday to Friday. This is where we all get together first and get inspired and get encouraged, and then we go and play life in the week. But we don't want your fellowship of Jesus to solely be about your connection into the life of a church based on only big Sundays, because we want to get you connected into a small group as well. And you know what? We actually get a bit of stick sometimes. People say, man, you should be doing loads more as a church. Like, you need to have a ministry for this, you need a men's ministry, a women's ministry, a feed the poor ministry, help the homeless ministry, you need to be doing a drop-off ministry, you need an after-school club, you need a nursery, you need a food. Like, people tell us all the time, like, you should be doing so much more. Like, you need to be like ramming the calendar. And we just don't feel like that's the most efficient and effective way of doing church. We just kind of feel like, man, we'd be so better off and best placed as a church when it comes to helping people. Like, let's just find the heroes in our city that are already helping people and help them, that those that have already got the people, the structure, the systems in place, so that we don't have to try and recreate the wheel and pretend like we're something that we're not. At the end of the day, we're a church, guys, and we want to help people, but the best way to help people is often by partnering with others that are doing it in our city. So for those of you who might be used to, well, I've used to be at a church and we used to do a whole lot more, like, I'm going to let you know, like, we're probably not going to be that church. We don't see it as being a thing. Like, we're just going to grow into doing more and asking more and wanting more of your time and more volunteers for this. We just don't see that as being who we are. But this is what we do see. We see as being completely committed to doing Sundays to the very best as we possibly can. And if we do that, hopefully it will increase your confidence in your inviting of people in your world to come and be a part of what you call church home every single weekend. And then secondly, small groups. Because we all know, right, that you can learn in a row, but you only grow in a group. So we want to see the small group element of our church thrive and flourish in the same way that our Sunday expressions do too. But it's not like we're just doing this because we think it's a good idea. Like, we think that this is the biblical model that's dictated to us from Scripture. Because when you read the book of Acts, which is all about like the early church, what you see is they kind of did two things. Firstly, they did temple worship. That was when they would meet once a week in a great big temple, like a church, and that they would study the Scriptures together, collectively. And they would all be a part of it. And it's where they would be inspired and they would be encouraged and hopefully led to a place of being able to believe that change in your life is really possible. But then what they did in partnership with temple worship was, it says that they did house-to-house ministry. In other words, they traveled from home to home and they would try and develop these relationships with other people that were all part of the temple worship on a weekend. And yet in a small group, they would try and pray together and understand more about who God is and the reasons why we follow God. And it was just like a great way. You know, statistically, and I'm not going to kind of bore you with all the details because I've done that in a few messages recently, But like the bottom line is, for our society, like in the West, in the UK, even in our city, like loneliness is just on the up. It's massive. Most people will now kind of say and give this sentiment out of they feel like they're often doing life alone. And I just don't want that to be the narrative of your life. Like I really passionately believe that if you're a part of Liverpool One Church, you don't have to do life alone. If you do, it's your choice, but you don't have to. The bottom line is that we don't want that to be the narrative of your life. We want you to feel like you've got friends like family. Because I know that it's a problem in your life in the same way it is in mine when you haven't got friends like family. I know that it's a problem because even the very first issue in the Bible, in all of the scriptures, is not what we think. We think that the Bible is this book that like talks loads about sin and how God's angry and God wants to like chastise us for all the stuff that we've done wrong. But actually, that's not the case at all. The Bible, this compilation of ancient documents and manuscripts that have been compiled together in the formulation of what we now refer to as the Bible, it's a book about a loving God who gave his one and only son to say, I really want a relationship with you. And I really want to make it possible for you to know who I really am. And actually, the first issue in the Bible was not sin. You know, the devil was not even introduced to us until chapter 3 of the first book of the Bible. In Genesis 1 and 2, there's no mention of Satan. In Genesis 3, we have a little bit of a mention of Satan and about how there's evil in the world. But in Genesis 1 and 2, it talks about how God created the skies, the stars, the sea, you and I. And yet he looks in Genesis 2 and says, but there's a problem. And the problem is that as he looked upon Adam, he said, well, it's just not good for man to be alone. The problem was not sin, it was solitude. It was solitude, which is the issue, it's the problem. In fact, Solomon, who was the wisest man to have ever lived outside of Jesus, writes this in Ecclesiastes 4. He says, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother, and there was no end to his toil. Like this is Solomon. He was wise. He had money. He was the wealthiest man around. People would travel all over to hear his wisdom. He had servants. He had slaves. I mean, he even had, check this, he even had over 100 wives. I mean, like, how did he do that? I don't mean how did he get married. I mean, how did he do that? 100 wives. I heard a student once ask a theological lecturer and say, why do you think that he had over 100 wives? And the lecturer just responded and said, I think he was just hedging his bets so that when he was coming home from work, he would hope that at least one of them was in a good mood. I'm just saying, like, you know, hey, I'm only kidding with you. But this guy, like, he had a load of people around him, 100 plus wives. He had people that would travel from afar to sit at his feet and listen to his wisdom. He had money, he had business partners, he had the whole thing going on. And yet he writes that when he's all alone with no brother, no friendship circle going on, it feels to him like there's no end to his toil. He's connecting the lack of people to an increase of problems in his life. He's saying, in essence, when I don't have the right people around me, it feels like there's no end to my problems. That's an issue, it's a problem, that's solitude. You know, we're gonna look in a moment to the passage or the book of John. And John's gospel is a little bit different to the other three gospels. So you might have heard of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the first three gospels. They're often referred to as the Synoptic Gospels. And they actually recount the event that we're going to take a big look at today from the book of John, which records the time in history when Jesus is about to have what was referred to as the Passover meal with a group of his disciples around a table, and it led to the Garden of Gethsemane, which then in turn led up to the crucifixion. But it's different, the book of John, in contrast to the other three. Because the other three books around this same event all kind of devote one chapter to it. But John's gospel gives us a whole nother level of just detail about what happened before, what was happening during the meal, and what was happening immediately after. I mean, in fact, there are 5 chapters in the book of John that are dedicated to this one singular event, what happened before, during, and after. And what's fascinating to me is that in these 5 chapters, there is this really strong relational theme that the writer is trying to convey to us about how, guys, if you're gonna follow Jesus, then you're going to need people with you. But this whole event starts with a story that maybe some of you might have heard about. Just before this meal that was due to take place, what was customary at the time would be that when you arrived at the venue of the meal, there would be a guy who was at the door, and it was his responsibility to wash those that were attending the meal's feet. I mean, that's a bad job right there, isn't it? You do not want that job. Like, hey, what have you been doing today? Oh, I've been washing some real crusty, stinking feet. Like, that's just not a great job right there. But when they arrive at the venue and the disciples are all about to sit down, Jesus realizes there's nobody at the door to wash their feet. So Jesus, who was the rabbi, who was the religious leader, who was the one respected to be in the position of leadership and authority over those disciples, got down on his hands and knees, and he decided that he was going to wash the feet of all the disciples. Now, this freaked the disciples out, especially one of them in particular. And I happen to have been studying this guy whose name is Peter for last week's message, and I stumbled upon this, and it just kind of perfectly tied into this week's talk, because Peter was the one that, he was so bold and brave in certain elements of his life. So when Jesus started to wash Peter's feet, Peter started to freak out, and he literally turns around in John 13 and he's like, no, I do not want you messing with my feet. Like, nobody touches my feet. I'm a little bit like that myself. Like, nobody comes near my feet. Way ticklish. Do not touch my feet. Don't come near my feet. That's what Peter was doing to Jesus. He was like, I don't want you having anything at all to do with my feet. But I think that there was a part of Peter that sort of realized, man, I don't want Jesus, my leader, the one that I'm following, I don't want him messing around with the dirt in between my toes, where it's a bit stinky, where my heels are a bit cracked, where there's grime under my toenails. I don't want that. I don't need that in my life. Jesus, no, you're not going to be the guy that sees that part of my life that really is designed for nobody else to see. I don't want you to see that. But what's fascinating to me is what Jesus says in response to Peter's complaints in John 13, verse 8. And he basically makes this statement. He says, unless I wash your feet, you can have no part with me. It's almost like Jesus was saying to Peter, here's the deal. You can travel with me from town to town, and you can see me do miracles, and you can hear me teach in the temple. But unless you're willing to be authentic and real around me and amongst me, and show to me the parts of your life that you're embarrassed about anybody else seeing, like the dirt, the cracks, the mess, the smell, unless you're willing to kind of be open to that level of relationship, then we can't walk together. Then we can't do this together. And if I'm honest, I think that problem is just as much a problem for us today in the church too. We love it when we come on a Sunday, we wear the I'm fine mask, but when it actually comes to letting people know, I'm not in a good place right now. Often what we'd rather do is never talk about that, never tell anybody about the struggles that we're wrestling with, the tensions that we're facing, the turbulence that's in our environment around us. We don't want people to do that. We don't want people to know that. And we're just trying to do the same thing that Peter was doing. He was like, no, nobody else needs to see those parts of my life that really aren't designed for anybody else to see. And Jesus was saying, yeah, but that's not what a real relationship is. A real healthy relationship is when you get to see all. So I guess that it's in light of the start of the events around that meal why I now want to give you and convince you of 5 reasons why you should join a life group. I want to give you 5 thoughts about why I want to encourage you to the extent that at the end of today's service that you're going to say, I'm willing to not only follow Jesus, but also be vulnerable and almost feel a little bit awkward, and I'm going to sign up to a life group. Even if you're an introvert, even if you feel like that's not what I do, that's the problem. It's because it's not what you do. It falls completely outside of the model that Jesus gives us, and I'm going to show you how and why that happens through those 5 chapters of the book of John. So, the first reason why I would encourage you to join a life group and be a part of a small group is because you need the same thing that I need. You need someone to talk to your problems about. When you're sick, when you're sad, when you're facing something going on in your business, when you're facing redundancy, when there's something going on relationally, when you're struggling with your kids, when your environment in the culture and context of your life feels like this has got so out of hand, you need someone to talk to your problems with. And that's who your life group leaders are. That's who those that are in your life group can be. They can be that army of brothers and sisters to get around you when it feels to you like your life is falling apart. You need someone to talk about your problems with. John 13, verse 12 through 15 says this. When he'd finished washing their feet, talking about the event that happened immediately prior to the meal, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your teacher, your Lord, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I just want to give you a little caveat statement. Don't worry. No one's going to have to undo their Air Max at Life Group this week, okay? No one's going to be